Emergency Services Program Manager for the Governor Center for Local Government Services.
That was the formal way of saying she's my boss. Okay. I'm John Seneft. I served as the project facilitator. Just a little bit of a background. I served as a municipal fire chief in a city not too far from here, and throughout the course of the years, had some occasion to get active at the state level. I served as a member of the SR 60 Commission a few years ago. Since then, I have done some consulting for DCED as a contractor, and since retirement, I've come on board. I am a part-time state employee within Yvonne's unit of government that she oversees. There are several of us with different backgrounds. Both law enforcement, EMS, and fire and emergency services that work part-time for the state to provide consulting services and technical expertise in different areas. Mine just happens to be fire and emergency services, and this just happens to be one of the projects that I have done. Todd asked me to sit up front today for the benefit of the microphone and recording. Today's focus, your focus needs to be up here or in the printed version of the report that you have, not on me. This is just for audio-visual purposes. A little bit of background. This project started off several years ago. We had some interruptions. We had some interruptions with COVID. We had to pause because some of the data that we were getting was not accurate. So we came back, we did a restart. This project ran concurrently with another project that was done, and that was facilitated by Jessica Bartow, again from Local Government Services at DCED. Jessica's emphasis was on the emergency medical services component of the project, and she completed her report and presented that to a similar audience just about a year ago. And you've already gone through, followed through, and did some of the recommendations there. In my report, I do have a reference to that. Most of what we are talking about are fire and emergency services related things, maybe with a little bit of inference into EMS from a fire department involvement standpoint, but that EMS component was done separately, and copies of that report are on file should you need that. Also, concurrently with this, Jessica Fieldhouse from CS Davidson has been working on the strategic comprehensive plan for the 5 municipalities. And Todd, that's in the process of being finalized for release later this year?
Correct.
Is that?
If everything goes well, the final draft is completed, so township officials will probably be seeing that in the next couple of weeks in their, excuse me, their planning commissions. So.
Yeah. A little bit about today's report. This comes to you in 2 sections. The first 12 pages are narrative based on my results, my observations, my findings, and some recommendations. Following that are some different references there in the appendix. That is for your reference to kind of substantiate how did we get to where we are and other things to think about as we go down the road. If you follow through, page 1 of the report tells you a little bit about the background. Todd, in his role as township manager, served as the primary point of contact for the project. Goes in to talk about the involvement of Jessica Bartow and Jessica Fieldhouse from CS Davidson and their projects. When you get to the sections that are in bolder type thing in the center of the page here, the intent of the report is to provide information for municipal officials to assist in making informed decisions regarding public fire protection within the respective municipalities in the region for the municipalities operating correctly. And again, that kind of goes in to reinforce what the role of the local municipality is in providing fire protection for its municipality. For as much as the fire companies themselves do it as the agent, the authority for them to do that comes from various laws. And Todd, if you could go over to page 3, please. That authority for both a second-class township and boroughs are referenced on pages 3. And now, Todd, if you would go over to 4. And the appropriate sections are cited there of the borough or township code for reference. I think it's important for you to remember as we go through, you gotta know, where is the legal authority, where does it come from, and if you wanna go back far enough, how did it get there? And then over on page 5, at the top of the page, we start with the recommendation. And that is for the municipalities to formally meet with their fire departments, in this case, the 3 volunteer fire companies, to discuss and agree upon response capabilities and limitations. The parties should then document the role of the municipalities and the fire departments in appropriate written agreements. It's important to understand that for as much as fire departments today are all hazard response agencies, the municipalities that the fire departments serve need to understand that they are not necessarily always the one-stop shop to be everything, do everything. And along with that, there are capabilities and there are limitations that go with that. Some of those include a bomb squad. Typically, fire departments would not have a bomb squad. Some have more technical rescue capabilities than others. Some have greater water rescue capabilities than others for either what is referred to as flat water or swift water. But they might not have subsurface capabilities, such as a dive team. It's important for the municipalities to understand what their fire departments can and cannot provide, and then also the expectation on what level of service they should provide and how you want to mutually agree upon that. So everybody, the local elected officials at the municipalities and the fire departments, have a good, clear understanding of that. We continue along with page 5 with a little bit of an overview about the fire departments. These are some general observations, with each of the fire departments being a Pennsylvania nonprofit corporation and also recognized under section 501c3 or c4 of the Internal Revenue Code. The 3 fire departments there are mentioned appropriately. Also, in the overview, I distinguished between the terms company, department, and fire station, just from the standpoint of to provide clarity for those that are not familiar with how fire organizations work. That narrative continues over onto page 6. Talks a little bit about mutual aid and some of the general operating things of the fire department. Also talks about the exchange of services across not just a county line, but a state line, and for the affected companies here, primarily involved with Baltimore and Carroll counties. There's a recommendation at the bottom. While the fire companies have an excellent working agreement with each other, future consideration might be given to formalizing an agreement. This would provide a written document for future generations to help avoid any confusion and any word-of-mouth agreements that have not been formally documented. Such agreements should include provisions for workforce sharing and cross-staffing between the fire departments. Throughout our discussion, and many of you were involved with those discussions, it was pretty clear that you have pretty good cooperation in this section of the county. One of the things that seemed to be lacking was, for as good as that works and as good as that handshake agreement is, could we strengthen that? Should we strengthen that or document that, particularly as we go down the road and formalize that into written agreements? Continuing on to page 7, we talk about personnel, the use of volunteers and the cost savings to the taxpayers, and that section ends up, and I put this in bold, again about 2/3 of the way down the page. Dollar for dollar, the volunteer-based system provides an enormous tax savings to the municipalities and their taxpayers. While that seems to work well today, we have concerns as to how long that will work in the future, and I'll talk about that as we come up a little bit. Page 7 continues on with governance and a recommendation there, and that is to each of the fire companies as a nonprofit corporation should review their bylaws, remove items related to fire department operations, and establish them as a separate document. Remembering that bylaws should be the basic document for a way that an organization functions in Pennsylvania as a nonprofit corporation. Operational things, a lot of those should be moved out into such documents as standard operating guidelines, standard operating procedures, and other such things. Continuing over page 8, administrative issues. Talk a little bit about record retention, financial issues, and some recommendations there. And that is that the fire companies and municipalities should meet regularly to review financial data and operational issues of mutual interest. You should continue with discussions involving current financial needs and performance as well as future needs, and funding for capital projects, particularly those involving apparatus replacement, and facilities should be reviewed and evaluated. Based on the cost of materials and production, we did not go into a whole lot of projections there, and understand that as variable as cost of materials are these days, to try and run any kind of a long-term plan out more than 2 or 3 years today with price variability is going to be challenging. If you look at the cost of fire apparatus, the price of steel and other raw materials is so variable, I couldn't even begin to think where that might go in the future. A few years ago, in my capacity as a fire chief, buying a fire engine, we thought $500,000 was a lot for a fire engine. My city council thought that was an enormous amount for a fire engine. To try and replace one today, you're at the $1 million mark, and probably $2 million for aerial apparatus and other specialized equipment. Page 8, we go in, we talk about water supply. I tried to look at this and approach this not just from the standpoint about fire departments, but the comprehensive fire protection plan for the municipality. And with that, water supply issues come up. The recommendations on that follow on page 9, that the municipalities should meet collectively to discuss future water needs, especially the need to establish and maintain reliable and sustainable water supply for fire protection. Just a side note and commentary, because I know some of you were involved with this. The large fire that happened over in Stewartstown in recent history, they had some pre-planning done on that, and they were able to work through some water supply issues as was described to me. Whether it is stored water, whether it is water from a public system, whether it's water from a static source that you draft from or may take from other sources through pre-established drafting sites. Somewhere as you go down the road and look at this, you have to look at water supply issues. We also talked about fire flow requirements for the municipalities, depending upon where you are in any given area. That may vary, such as your downtown, more densely populated areas or your more built-up areas would have higher fire flow requirements than your agricultural areas where you're protecting crops and pastures and other things. Consideration might also be given to the involvement of the York Water Company in those discussions as they currently serve a portion of this area. Page 9, we continue on with community risk reduction and the elements of community risk reduction. Under that, a lot of that we think about the emergency response and what the fire departments do in emergency response. We also need to think about what is the community's role in actually reducing the risk or managing the risk through not just effective response from the emergency response agencies, fire and EMS, but what can be done on a proactive level to help reduce things, such as, are there portions of the area that you serve where you should consider adopting a wildland urban interface code to help manage vegetation in areas that are being built up because of threats from wildfire. And that's just an example. There's some resources mentioned there, and they are highlighted in blue as you go through. The website strategicfire.org, as well as materials from the U.S. Fire Administration at usfa.fema.gov. They are all free resources to reference for that. Page 10 goes into some general observations that I had when we were looking at this. About a third of the page down, in bold, I have in that the all-volunteer model provides exceptional cost savings to the community when compared to an all-career system. That is simply a financial statement. From a financial standpoint, this system should be supported as long as adequate staffing permits. And then the question is, and this is something that the elected officials need to prepare for, and why I am urging discussion now at this time with your fire department representatives, how long can that be sustained for 24-hour coverage at the level of coverage that you want and expect? In casual discussions, I think we had consensus that somewhere, maybe 3 to 5 years down the road, that probably each one of the volunteer fire companies operating from their own existing stations will probably need to have some support for weekday, daytime coverage, and that is probably going to need to be done by people who are compensated to do so. And again, that was discussion as we went through things. Also in the future considerations, the way that we report incidents is changing. At the national level, what we know as the National Fire Incident Reporting System is being transitioned and retired. That brings in a new system called the National Emergency Response Information System, NARIS. That's going to be the future standard for reporting for fire departments across the country. And I include that in the report because with that, the local fire departments will have a cost to transition to that system, and that's something that should be planned for and budgeted accordingly. So that rolls over and continues on to page 12, and that essentially ends the narrative. If we follow back through into the appendices, provided in there for reference are some selected maps from response areas. And that goes back for several pages. Page 18, I included a Baltimore County map for reference. In many cases, the closest Baltimore County station is just right across the state line there in Maryland, and understand that mutual aid between those counties, as well as some of the parts of Carroll County, are exchanged on a regular basis. Following page 18 on the Baltimore County map, there are some examples of some statistical reports for a year's period. Station 58 appears first, followed by 59 in Glen Rock, and then in 61 from Shrewsbury. And this is just a year's representation of the number and type of calls that the fire departments respond to. And again, for as much as we continue to call these organizations fire departments, understand that they indeed are all hazard response agencies. There's some selected maps that follow, and they involve hydrants at selected locations throughout the service area. And I included that so you know where things are and have a little bit of an idea on maybe how to start the thought on water supply and how to identify future water supply issues. As we run this report kind of concurrently in the exchange of information that I had with Jessica Fieldhouse from CS Davidson, other issues of impact. Traffic counts on Interstate 83, traffic counts on the Susquehanna Trail, infrastructure issues such as capabilities and limitations of roadways and bridges. A lot of things in the community have an impact on the way fire departments deliver services, particularly with the weight of fire apparatus today and in the future, and the capabilities and sizes of roadways, bridges, underpasses, and other such things. So if we go up to page 31, if you would please, Todd. Page 31 and page 32 that follow are reproductions of pages of the report of the Joint Commission on the SR 60 resolution. This work was done and identified as far back as 2003 and 2004. Page 31 looks at a standard of service matrix, and this was formulated knowing that statewide there are different parts throughout the Commonwealth where people want or desire different levels of service, and examples of different levels of service that are provided. Such as if you would look into Pennsylvania's northern tier counties that are very, very sparsely populated and look at service level F, which is at the top of the list there, which is called a defensive service level, understanding that they may only be able to provide 3 people with 1 fire engine, and all they can do is defend the surrounding area from what's burning, and there's no time limit to get them there. Because some of the rural areas in those counties, Sullivan, Forest, other remote counties like that that may be very acceptable because there may be very, very little threat to human life in those areas. The other extreme is if you go down to service level A, which are offensive capabilities, providing 15 personnel, 2 engines, and an aerial device capable of doing interior firefighting at up to 10,000 square feet, and the ability to extinguish fire and save lives and property, arriving on the scene within 9 minutes of time of dispatch 90% of the time. And then there's a variety of service levels described in between there. So as you think about things from the standpoint particularly of elected officials, what is the expected level of performance that you want from your fire department in your discussions with the fire department? What are their capabilities to provide that? And then if you identify a gap in between, how do you work to do that? There is nothing that says you have to use this matrix. You can certainly write up your own levels of expectations, and depending upon where you are within a given municipality, such as here in Shrewsbury Township, with as large a land area as the township is, you might have an industrial or a commercial area where you want a higher level of service than what you would in a more remote area where you have more of an agricultural application and there is less threat to human life or property. Following this page up to page 32 then outlines some of the basic training requirements or some of the training requirements that are suggested to maintain those service levels. So that's the report. That's the narrative, including my observations and recommendations and the supporting materials in the appendices, and I'm okay for questions.
Quiet group.
Mm-hmm.
And a hush fell over the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a little bit more about the recommendation, perhaps sometime in the future with a station at Station Road, I guess it is?
Yeah, I did make a reference up here. Outside of this, I do have an observation in there. For as much as the scope of work for this report dealt with the 5 municipalities, the township and the 4 boroughs, as we look at the comprehensive plan and discussions with the amount of traffic on Interstate 83 and the Susquehanna Trail, looking north of here into Springfield Township, I think in the future there might be an opportunity for a joint conversation with Springfield Township to the north regarding shared services there. Also, with projection and projected growth in both Shrewsbury and Springfield Township, you have to ask the question: could it be beneficial in the future to think about the consideration for an emergency services station somewhere up around Susquehanna Trail and Church Street, Susquehanna Trail, and the connector over to exit 10 at Route 216, and that. I think that warrants a discussion with the neighbors to your north. And again, Springfield Township and the fire departments north of here were outside of the scope of this project.
Thank you.
Sir?
I almost hate to raise my hand. Kim and I are both 72 this year. service level A is what I would like to have. I don't know what my constituents want to pay for. I would say probably not that, because we've already had some pushback just getting the chase truck approved this last year. Is there, I mean, what possible guidelines can you use to try to determine what you can afford and what you can, or what you should have? I mean, obviously, if you have one EMT or, you know, 2 first responders, I guess that, I mean, that doesn't even require an EMT, I guess. But when they get there, what are they going to do? If my child has his hand crushed in a lawnmower because he got caught by a blade, or, I mean, you know, putting a Band-Aid on something isn't gonna work. So I'm just trying to get my hands around,
Okay.
how do we come up with any kind of a model that would say, this is what we need and this is what we can afford? Does that make sense? I'm trying to, struggling to ask the question.
I think I understand that, and let me just go for reference over to page 32, okay? Down to the EMS service levels, that's where you are, correct?
That's where I was looking.
And EMS service level A, advanced life support with 1 EMT and 1 paramedic. Ideally, to give you a good comprehensive answer for this, I should answer this with Jessica Bartow, who did the EMS portion of the report. Let me give you a non-specific answer to this, and that is, you can have any level of service you want, depending upon how much you want to pay. Again, EMS is kind of, and EMS was done separately from my portion of the report, which is what we're
You can
reviewing
switch it
today.
to fire. I mean, the same thing applies to fire.
Well,
Obviously, if my house is on fire and my kids are in it, I want offensive service level A.
Let me
But
go
I
back.
don't know that I can afford that.
Let me go back and just differentiate that a little bit, because when we're looking at EMS, there are 2 big factors in providing emergency medical services that are not factored into providing public fire protection. One is, ultimately, somewhere in the cycle of EMS, it usually results in a vehicle, typically called an ambulance, hauling somebody to a place typically referred to as a hospital, okay? And under third-party reimbursement driven by Medicare and the insurance industries, that is typically cost recoverable, and EMS agencies typically bill for that service, as well as other things. So with EMS, you have patient transportation and you have billing for cost recovery that in many cases is way outside of what fire departments do unless they operate an ambulance business with it, okay? So that said, let's go over and let's look at, okay, let's look at fire protection and public fire protection. And Todd, reference us now over to page 31, if you could, please. Okay. Offensive service level A. Getting 15 trained personnel there with 2 engines and an aerial device within 9 minutes from time of dispatch, 90% of the time. Okay. Fire guys, how close are you to that?
Is that with combined companies or a single company?
It is measured by the event.
So if we have a major event in Glen Rock,
Okay.
Shrewsbury, New
Let
Freedom.
let me give you an example here, okay? So we're looking for 3 pieces in service level A at a minimum. we're looking for 2 engines and an aerial device. Okay, with a total of 15 people on the scene within 9 minutes from time of dispatch. So, do you bring an aerial device from one of the stations and an engine from each of the other 2 to get that total? That would seem reasonable to me. And in some kind of a combination of 3 pieces of apparatus, or maybe a supporting vehicle, can you get your 15 people there? And can you get them there? Can you get them there within 9 minutes, 90% of the time?
It'd be close.
Okay. So if I look at this, and if today's answer is no, can you get them there? Can you get them there within 9 minutes? 50% of the time. And is the other 50% of the time you can't get them there because there's nobody around to do that? And is that the period that you identify that you will need to supplement either today or in the future with some level of paid staffing? Okay? This all comes down, when you look at service levels and service level delivery capability, this is all a matter of acceptable level of risk. What do you want and how much you're willing to pay for it? Okay? No different than me deciding what level of coverage I want on my homeowner's insurance and what I want the premium to be. The only thing is here, essentially, the elected officials and your fire department officers have to mutually agree upon that.
I haven't lived in Maryland for 40 years, but many years ago, they were, I guess, going through what you're talking about here that we're going to be doing in 3 to 5 years of having to provide some paid manpower,
Mm-hmm.
probably during the day, maybe even 24/7. Is some of that going on now within the state of Pennsylvania, and is it, where is it worked and where is it not worked? Because I know Maryland, years ago, had issues with it.
Good. Come on in.
Dallastown, Yo area has supplemental staffing Monday through Friday, 7 to 5. They just up their personnel from 1 person one day to upwards of 4. So it's happening a little bit.
And it seems to be working. I know years ago in Maryland, there were some issues between
Yeah.
being paid and volunteer.
And typically, I think statewide where we see the biggest deficit are weekday, daytime hours of coverage, because that's when the majority of other people work and are not around to do their volunteer fire type things. But, and a very good example there, going on right now in York County, and growing throughout other parts of the state as well, particularly in the counties in the southeastern part of the state, and maybe 2 counties in the southwestern part of the state as well.
And one other, Shrewsbury, we haven't got it yet, what's coming in September, a new rescue, about 1.4 million.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at what the state will allow you to do in a low interest loan now, it barely scratches the surface. Is there anything at the state level that's trying to rectify that to help out? Because it's really not much help.
I don't know what is currently in place there or what the future things are. I would suggest this, I would suggest that you put your concerns in writing, send them to Tom Cook, the state fire commissioner, as well as to your local elected representatives, and ask them to pursue that. Some of the things that are, might be done there might be done administratively. A lot of that is done legislatively, such as the 2% loan, the cap on the 2% loan, and other things. There might be some legislative influence there that can move that ahead for you.
Thank you.
Is there a training course for elected officials to, I mean, I did a lot of research going in, Kim and I both did, as far as budgeting and the fact that our fire company being volunteer probably saves us at least $500,000, probably
Oh.
closer to $1 million in budgeting tax dollars. And so I think Kim and I have both been proponents for, you need a ladder truck, we should help you buy a ladder truck, kind of, you know. But I mean, we are, 100% honest with you. I mean, we have 2 council members that voted no for EMS, who voted no for the fire truck. I mean, we go through this next election and they get 2 more on their side. I mean, we have a mess. So how do we convince elected officials as to the necessity of supporting this system? You understand where I'm coming from? I mean, my concern is, I mean, I don't, you know, we only have so much money coming out of our, you know, municipalities. And everybody is very conscious and they want to keep taxes low.
Yeah.
But it's a requirement to have an EMS tax and a fire tax, and to support as much as possible our fire and EMS.
Keeping taxes low is a great idea. However, and just remember as an elected official, one of the things that I think is incumbent for you to convey upon your constituents is you only get what you pay for, okay? And that's everything from buying fire trucks of the appropriate size, shape, and design to patching potholes, okay? You know, I worked alongside a public works director one time who told my mayor, he said, "Mayor, we can pave every alley in the city of York if you want it paved, if you give us enough money." And that's why it comes down to, and you gotta go back and you gotta think about this acceptable level of risk. What is acceptable to you as elected officials and the people that you represent?
But getting that information out isn't all that easy to make them understand, because as all of us know, we've got a lot of transplants from Maryland. They come up here and they see on the bill EMS flyer tax. What the hell? We never had to pay for that in Baltimore County. Well, yes, you did. It just didn't show up. Now we've got to explain to them on an individual basis why we bill
Same
this
money, different
separately.
name. Yeah.
Yeah, but they just can't get it through their.
Yeah. I would think,
Then why can't we do the same thing as Baltimore County does?
as far as what?
As far as, well, they look at it as no additional tax.
Well, the
When
answer
it's
to that
built
is
in.
we're a Commonwealth state.
I know.
Everybody has a little fiefdom going on.
Yeah, and they just don't understand how Pennsylvania operates.
Yeah. In order to help convey that to those that elect you, you might look at 2 resources. At the borough level, the State Association of Boroughs, to see what they might be able to provide. or in the case of a second-class township, the state the State Association of Township Supervisors. Yeah,
Well, I think most of us put out a newsletter also, and maybe it's a good thing to put
Yeah.
in our newsletters how Pennsylvania operates,
So-
because we have so many
so
Maryland.
if you look at this, and if you look at this collectively, and let's do this along the same theme of community risk reduction, that starts with education and information. Do you need to inform your constituents what they get for their dollar? You know, and particularly in the area of emergency services, you know, can you do that as a joint project through the 5 municipalities and the 3 fire departments? And it's like, let's just showcase and say what it is. This is what we do for you. This is what you currently get for your investment through money that we appropriate. And here's what it's gonna cost today, or here's what it costs today, and here's what it may cost in the future.
You and I should write a joint article
Yeah,
to go in the newsletter
yeah.
and try to head off some of this stuff.
Okay?
for the next
And could I suggest if the two of you wanna do that jointly from your municipality, could you join with the other elected officials at the township and borough level to jointly do it for all 5 municipalities?
Oh, absolutely, because there's between mutual aid and, you know, and getting those 15 people to the fire, I mean, all of us have to pitch in together to do that, so,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we're using Glen Rock and Shrewsbury Borough to supplement, and they're using us to supplement their, so, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, sure. And remember, when we talk about, in emergency services, when we talk about mutual aid, it's designed to be mutual. You know, it goes both ways. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And what you said about inflation and steel and everything else, it really affects the municipalities and our fire companies. We're just purchasing a new tower truck. The original cost came in at about $1.1 million. Now I think it's about 1.6, 1.7 million dollars.
Oh, sure.
9 that came out.
Sure.
1.9.
And you know, if you look at things, and this is one of the things that I made reference to, at some point, collectively, somebody needs to have a conversation with Springfield Township because of the way the growth is and the traffic flow. Without that aerial device in New Freedom, if you go south, where's your next closest aerial device? Baltimore County 17.
Texas. Yeah.
Right. Right. If you go north, where's your next closest aerial device? Yeah. Yeah, York Township or somewhere in the York, in the York area. There are selected resources that, depending upon the level of service that you want, are spread pretty thin. And again, going back to your original question there about EMS capabilities are very thin some days as well. And a lot of that is truly driven by not the location of the resources or how they're staffed, but what the demand for service is. That sometimes in some parts of the county, you just might run out of ambulances, or you might run out of advanced life support units.
And part of that problem recently has been the number of calls that we're making to Baltimore County with mutual aid. You know,
Yeah,
and we've got somebody in New Freedom that's got a cardiac arrest, you know, and here we are way down in Maryland, where 60 has nobody basically at the station. They don't, you know.
But the reason you're going to Baltimore County is because that unit's out, and there's several times knowing their units come to York County as well.
Are they?
From 45
How
and
many,
from 60.
how many times do they come? I'd like to see
a little bit slight, you got the Baltimore County map in there, but, numbers and stuff don't play really. Baltimore County, is basically 598 square miles. York County is 904 square miles, Baltimore County is 598 square miles. The map that you're looking at, so basically, if you look at the Baltimore County map, 45, 60, and 44, that's gonna be your area from exit 27 and 83 north of the state line. You're looking at 10-mile north to south, and then basically Harford County to the Carroll County line, east to west. Baltimore County's 2024 fire department budget to cover 24 career engine, or 24 career stations and 1 full medic station, and all the career fire stations have a minimum of 1 ALS unit in the house, and supplement 28 career fire stations was $128.8 million for 2024. So, now, looking back, I know Shrewsbury Fire Company's first due district is about 32 square miles. Glen Rock, what do you got roughly? Probably pushing 42.
Yeah, it's a little more than that. We look at all three, they're all 4 municipalities that we cover.
Okay, so you're pushing out towards like Glenville area more and stuff. So we're not looking near the square mileage like Baltimore County. We're only talking about 3 stations covering half the different municipalities, 5 municipalities. But if you figure out the Baltimore County Career Department is about 1,100 persons strong, their volunteer department that they're supplementing between the 28 stations is about 2,500 people on the roster. But, so like I say, talking about people moving from south of the line, north of the line, it's just like when they get a bill for their school tax. Most of them go into cardiac arrest when they look at the amount of it. They're like, we never paid this. They never paid for trash, south, that was all figured into their, and again, just like you spoke up, it's the difference between Commonwealth and a non-Commonwealth. Each, up here, each municipality basically fends for themselves, then the county's a blanket over top of it. When you cross that state line, the county has that big umbrella under it, and like the town of Hereford or the town of Parkton, they don't have anything of their own. They rely on the county to provide resources. So, it's just, like I say, it's great to have those numbers and like to count that, but it's 2 different types of government. Unfortunately, when it comes down to fire protection, it's 2 different types of fire protection. But, I know I've been a 25-year employee with Baltimore County Fire Department. I know, what their struggles are. And it's like anything else. The equipment costs all go up. It's the nature of the beast. And whether it's career or volunteers, you gotta face it. We're fortunate for my employer, and I'm speaking now as just a non-fire department person. I'm just a guy from Shrewsbury that lives in the borough. I work south of the border. I do a job because they hired me. But like I say, the bang for the buck up here, the municipality gets is great. We just have to figure a way to keep that and how to build on it. And like I say, it's just one of the things. We've known about this for years. It's just, again, as people move up here, fortunately our cadet program at Shrewsbury is blossoming. But that's the cadet program. Getting folks in young, maybe they'll hang around. I don't know. But you gotta start. So recruitment retention is a big thing. It's gotta be, we still gotta look at other avenues as well. But like I say, but let me just back up my thinking. Just don't blame the mutual aid responses on units not being available. And just remember that mutual aid goes 2 ways.
Yeah, and again, that's a contrast between, 2 different systems, 2 different ways to do business.
I just know I get the monthly numbers and it just seems like it's higher and higher. And we don't know what to do about it, because our main objective is to protect our own borough. And, our constituents in that borough.
Yeah, that's why I think, shared service agreements are so important.
areas for how many a day. The downside just comes from the distance travel. You know, I think my folks in Glen Rock coming from Glen Rock to anywhere in Shrewsbury, you know, it could be 3 minutes to get to the firehouse, go in the truck, plus another 7 minutes, so that's 10 right there. Barring any sort of delays or.
And with that,
travel.
factoring in travel, regular travel time, traffic, road conditions, they're all variables.
Yeah, 9 minutes, 90% of the time is a crazy number. I mean, it really is. I mean, because just by the time, I mean, New Freedom, Rose is doing great. I mean, they're out of the gate in a couple of minutes, and I think that's a fantastic, you know, getting the truck out the door time. But I mean, you run into, you know, just a modicum of traffic on the way to, I mean, to get to the other end of Shrewsbury Township or to get, to,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, you're not gonna have 9 minutes all the time. I mean, not even nine, just don't think you're gonna have it 90% of the time.
With the volunteer service, I can speak for Shrewsbury. The first 5 minutes of that is getting to the station, turning the fire,
Right, exactly.
responding from home, and that's the cost of volunteer service.
You have bunk rooms and guys that are staying there?
We don't have people staying.
See, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're
we-
fortunate
that
that
5 minutes.
we do, and they can get out and.
But that could go
Less than
away
2
at any
minutes.
time too, because those guys are, I
Absolutely.
mean, they're young and they're like, you know, competitive, but you know, as they get older and get families and stuff, they're not gonna wanna be at the fire station, so. Yeah, so I think, I mean, I think going for B would probably be.
Steering.
Well, we talked about, I'm sorry, you want to say something?
No.
3 to 5 years, and I agree with that in my own assessment, that something's, and so it's like 3 things that are gonna hit, our area. One is, actually having to pay some labor, to be blunt, for man the station. The other is the cost of apparatus. I know Shrewsbury, our one engine is what, 30 years old? And, you know, like, the cost is going crazy, so it's not just in 1 or 2 areas, it's like 3 areas. And trying to get the young people involved, because the age of responders seems to keep creeping up, and they're gonna age out. It's critical that this next 3 to 5 years,
And at that point, I mean, this doesn't put any recommendation there, but at that point, is it gonna be beneficial for us to get together and mutually look at maybe a southern regional centralized paid organization?
Well, certainly that's an option to consider.
Instead of each of us paying our own, have one
It's-
central,
You know, it's
how do
simply,
you find that work?
it's simply a matter of how you choose to do business. You know, if we look at the participating municipalities now, and this is stated in, I am anticipating this will be stated in the strategic comp plan that Jessica Fieldhouse is working on. We'll already know that there is one municipality that does not participate in the regional police department and does not have any future desire to do so based on where we currently are. Is that reasonably correct, Todd? Yeah. Unfortunately, you know, whereas that municipality can seek and request services from the state police, in fire and emergency medical services, you don't have that option. So the advantages to do something regionally for fire protection, is that worth discussing? I would certainly think so. The question's gonna be, how do you look at that? How do the 5 municipalities approach that with the 3 volunteer fire departments? You know?
Because if they turn into 3 paid fire departments, it's gonna be a major problem, taxpayers and us
I
as
don't,
councilmen.
I don't know what the number is, and maybe our fire company representatives can tell us, but I would be willing to bet that you would lose a lot of volunteers if you took away your hometown fire companies. I mean, not 100%, but you're gonna certainly lose some percentage of volunteers. You know, those guys who, love Rose and who sleep over, and, you know, if you put them in another, like a centrally located where some of the people were paid, you're gonna lose some of that camaraderie and some of the volunteers.
But can't we just take a look at seeing whether or not it's feasible, this concept, Chief? I mean, of regionalization
saying 3 to
prior to,
5
we're not
years.
talking about implementing.
You know, if you go back and read the report, the first 12 pages, I cannot emphasize enough on the cost savings and the dollar for dollar return for the investment that today's volunteers do for you. Now, what you have right now is you have 3 independent fire departments that work collectively. Whether it's on a handshake agreement, whether it was something that was done years ago, in writing, not in writing, the functional performance is when the tones drop and they're all dispatched to an incident, they all work together to complement each other.
Absolutely.
Are there some things that should be formalized and put in writing? Yes, I believe so. The challenge comes that when you recognize when that time is that you need to start to supplement the existing volunteer staff, particularly in what we believe to be daytime, weekday hours. How do you do that? Do you do that by each one of the fire companies retaining its own people and compensating them accordingly, and then the municipalities just, you know, increase the amount of appropriation to them on an annual basis to cover that? Or do you establish some sort of an umbrella organization to represent all 5 municipalities and all 3 fire departments to address that issue of how do we provide the supplemental coverage during the hours selected? How do we select the personnel? How do we employ them? And other things. And truly, now is the time to think about that. So when that date comes that you need that, you at least conceptually have an idea in place. This is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is how much we're going to pay for it.
I think a good first start is to form, and we already have a committee, you know, formalize it and have members of the fire company and members of the municipality, the local government, together on that committee so that the fire company can educate us on what's required and we can figure out what to do financially.
You know, and truly, your first step is to all get together, talk, mutually agree upon things, and they are yeah, capabilities and limitations. What we need now and what we're gonna need in the future, what you need now and what you're gonna need in the future for sure is gonna be money to keep the fire departments running. And I don't see that decreasing in years down the road. You know, even to maintain the acceptable level of service as it is today, the cost to do that's gonna go up. You know, I mean, just the cost of staying in business is increasing without expanding or enhancing any services. But now is the time to talk. Now is the time to talk. Now is the time to start to write things down. Yeah, whether that happens 5 years down the road and you put 2 firefighters at 3 fire stations 5 days a week for 10 or 12 hours a day, or whether or not you collectively look at how to replace and fund a 30-year-old engine that's staffed exclusively by volunteers, now is the time to start that conversation. Let me say, to formally start that conversation.
Should we try to do a quarterly meeting between all of us? Quarterly, semi-annually, what
I would
do we
think,
all think we need to do?
I would think that the frequency of how often to meet will be determined by the group itself.
And you were talking about having things in writing. Can you be a little more specific on what that should be?
Now, let me get a page here to reference. This is just an example, okay? Page 3 of the report, under authority, and this is from the Borough Code, okay? To ensure that fire and emergency medical services are provided within the borough by the means and to the extent determined by the borough, including the appropriate financial and administrative assistance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The borough shall require any emergency services organization receiving borough funds to provide the borough with an annual itemized listing of all expenditures of those funds before the borough may consider budgeting any additional funding to the organization. Question, do you do that today?
We get an annual report, audited financials from the fire company.
Okay? Does it meet the satisfaction of the council and the mayor?
Unfortunately, it doesn't come in at a good time. I mean, I just got it this week, the budget for EMS and for our fire for the year. If we're gonna look at budgeting, I mean, we need that in September.
Well, you're never gonna get that though,
I know,
because
I
they're on
know.
an annual basis and it is what it is. But that's why I think if we had a meeting where we were all sitting in the same room, as we got close, let's say we met every 2 months. And as we get closer to the budget cycle, we could then ask the question, so what do you guys need for next year?
Yeah.
And you
How-
can tell us.
How often do you as a borough currently meet with the fire department that primarily services your borough?
Well,
I
we
meet with
were,
them monthly.
yeah, we were well, you meet with them
I meet
monthly,
with them every month.
and the fire company was, coming to our, borough meeting monthly to discuss, training and calls, number of calls and things like that, so. But I think that there should be something that, like a finance committee or a needs committee or something where we can communicate.
Well, and again, locally, this is all about relationships. This is all about how you as elected officials want to do business with your fire people, establishing that relationship, having good open communications, and providing the appropriate documentation.
If I could follow up on Kim's question, I think we already have the blueprint for forming such a committee, because we have the schema, the Emergency Management Agency, which is all 5 municipalities. We have an intergovernmental agreement that all municipalities have adopted. We have bylaws and so forth, and that committee, well, actually the bylaws and the intergovernmental agreement establishes how often you will meet, how many represent each municipality, each fire company, each EMS service. So I think we kind of have the blueprint there. We just need to change the names and.
Yeah, so if it's already in place, you just need to expand the scope of
So
that?
what I would envision is we have, fire study, whatever, we can come up with whatever name we want to. But be an intergovernmental agreement, we would decide that, each municipality has 2 representatives. It could be one at large or one elected official, both elected officials, however you want to do that. And then, decide in that intergovernmental agreement how many people, probably an equal number of people representing each fire company would be a part of that committee. And then you would spell out in there, how often you want to meet, and then you have regular meetings. And
We have representatives from everybody here, but how do you all feel about doing something like?
I'd be okay with it if it was at a time when the volunteers don't have to take off work.
Well, our emergency management meetings are all evening meetings.
Yeah.
Another example is, right now it's only New Freedom Borough and Shrewsbury Township, but we have the Regional Recreation Commission. If you remember, we have an intergovernmental agreement, they have bylaws, and it's spelled out in there, talking about budgeting, it's spelled out in there when they must have their budget to each municipality, which is long before, which they can do that without having an audited, an
Oh,
audit.
yeah, you don't need an audit.
But I think they're the kind of things that John was talking about, I believe, having written down in agreements, how you're gonna proceed.
Probably so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just defer to Yvonne here for a minute.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, I just asked Chief, would he be available to help facilitate those discussions? And if that's needed, because unbiased position here, probably would be a good idea. We would just need another letter of intent for, additional technical assistance from the township, and we'll keep that rolling.
As well as each municipality is a signatory to that, correct?
That's not necessary.
No? Okay.
No, we wouldn't even need that.
Okay.
You just come from Todd for here, because we've already had this one phase. Yeah, just keep it. Yes.
Do we all think that that's a necessary thing to do?
Oh, yeah, I guess we should ask that
Equal
question.
independence? You think your councils and your representatives would be willing to do that? See some thinking going on.
Well, I think personally, I believe that the topic should be broached as far as a regionalization with everybody getting together and seeing maybe how we can cooperate a little bit better, and maybe even talks of maybe having some sort of regional department. I think that's necessary now. But I mean, as far as the budget stuff, you're getting your budget stuff, sounds like monthly, you understand what's going on with the fire company.
I do.
Brad's at every one of our meetings, and he makes sure that we're aware of anything that's needed. So, that part of it maybe can be handled each separately, but as far as the regional part of it, and how we can become better, and what's the next 3 to 5 years look like, yes, that should be taken care of right now.
From what he's saying, I think we have to make some considerations there for that.
And Art can, well, he can't kick me under the table, but, for Shrewsbury Township, I think it's really important to have such a group, so that we can do our long-range planning. Those that I've talked to that have requested funds from Shrewsbury Township, but, I've asked them just to keep in mind, New Freedom, Shrewsbury, Glen Rock, they're dealing with one fire company. We're getting it from 3 different places, asking for funds, which our current board is very supportive of fire and EMS. But, we're supporting 3 fire companies, and we just need to really do a little extra planning on our end. So I think it'd be really important for us so that we can continue to provide that support.
Why don't you put that together?
And long-range planning would include regionalization,
right,
those discussions. I don't think we would be boxing yourself
Not that it
into
has
just
to
one area.
happen,
No,
just
right,
that we're
exactly. It's to
ready if we
determine
get to
whether
that
it's feasible.
point. Because we all see it. We
Right.
saw it with EMS. We
Mhm.
started out with all volunteer, and
Right.
we had to pay for a couple. Now we're completely paid. Volunteers are gone.
Well, what I can do is I can talk to Yvonne offline here and figure out what we need, as far as Shrewsbury Township to request that additional funding. And then once I know where all that comes into play, then I can send a letter out to each of the municipalities and kind of present it as a formal proposal.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Just-
What do you guys envision? You say regionalization, what do you envision?
I think that's why we need to get together to see what we all might
Understanding.
envision if that should happen, where we're to the point where we have to start paying a couple. And like we did with EMS, we paid for a couple, we needed a paramedic. Then the next thing you know, we needed a paid EMT. Then we needed, everybody needed to be paid to keep up with
Cause I
the
envision,
volume.
like, EMS, there's a pay disparity between volunteer paying 2 EMTs and a paramedic this, between all 100% volunteer fire departments, to paying stipends to members, to paying $20 an hour for 2 people to man a station, to fully paid stations, which will be millions. Like, there's a larger disparity there. I think fully paid stations, I honestly don't see that in my lifetime here. I don't think it's necessary. I think this community is supportive of volunteers, and we do get volunteers. Will there reach a point that
A combination.
a couple people have to be paid? Likely, because it's creeping south. You can see it,
Yeah.
Red Lion, Dallas County Road is creeping south. First step, stipends per call basis. I don't know if that would make a difference. I don't know if you've seen it make a difference in departments.
I don't know if we have enough good information to measure that yet.
I know all of us here have really taken the bull by the horns and tried to do tax rebates. All of us have tax rebates, which I think all of our volunteers absolutely appreciate. I can't even believe they got the school district to go for it, but they did.
And let me just comment on that. Between the 5 municipal governments, the school district, and what the county of York has done as far as tax rebates for the volunteers, that is a model throughout the state. Particularly with a school district.
Yeah,
You know,
I never thought
That's-
that would go through.
that's
But those are the kind of
Kudos.
things that we could talk about if we got together. What are your thoughts? Where do you think we should go? It would be nice even if we just had a line that says, here's our financial needs over the next 10 years or 5
Yeah.
years.
Let-
You know what's coming on the horizon, as far as equipment goes.
As you look at that, let me just refer you back to the standard of service matrix. For any of the examples, or make one that fits your own scenario, and that could be one or more than one, knowing that we have different areas. It is that standard of service matrix, what you expect and the parameters for that, that's gonna drive everything that you do for that, as far as planning, finances, staffing, apparatus replacement, and
Well, yeah,
that.
looking at it from the EMS side, you know, you could put out something in the newsletter that says to your citizens, if you do this, you're gonna die. Or if you wanna live, you can increase your taxes by this much.
I mean, further to Brad's question, I think initially, if we just communicate better. as a
Yeah,
group,
exactly.
We have to do
Yeah.
that to a degree at Shrewsbury because there are 3 fire companies involved. So that's a sense of regionalization, but I think initially, just communicate and talk about some of the
Well,
things
the
we have to do.
communication from the township and the borough should be consistent in the sense that, you know,
You know, go ahead.
one other thing. One thing we kept missing with the EMS, and it took years, is we kept blowing the budget cycle. When, from a financial, when the township and the boroughs need to know some requests, and we blow budget cycle after budget cycle in those meetings and get nothing done.
Even that was communication. I
Yeah.
think if we just all got together and we were able to, you know, look at each other in the eye and say, okay, well, what do we need? You know,
Yeah, 'cause
and
it's
if you
gonna be
tell
a-
us what you need, we'll get it into the budget.
Yeah, it's gonna be a hard pill to swallow, but let's,
It is,
let's
but, you
find
know,
out what it is, yeah.
Well,
but,
initially,
but
we just
look
talk
at it
about
this way, I mean, when we came up with our tax increase last year, right?
Yeah.
It was last year, you know, I mean, it was like people were throwing rocks at us. And it was a small, very tiny tax increase, and it wasn't all just fire and EMS, a large portion of it was the police budget going up. So, at least this way, if we communicate and we get it out early, and we have that railroad track line that says where we're going to be, we can put it out to the citizens early and say, this is what we're planning, this is why we're planning it, and this is the service that you're going to get. And then we can sell it. I mean, it's, part of it's a marketing thing too, where you're just saying to the people, you know, we don't want you to have an 80% chance of losing your house. We want you to have a 20% chance of losing your house, and this gives you a better opportunity to keep your, I mean, even you know for a fact, when you sign up for house insurance, if you live, you know, 30 feet from a hydrant, you get a break. You know, if you're closer to the fire company, you get a break. You know, if there's no fire company within 10 miles of your house, you're gonna pay a little bit more for your house insurance.
And another thing we haven't touched on, as you look at paid or partially paid or all volunteer, is these guys all raise a lot of money on their own. It doesn't come from the municipal treasurers. So if you take that and go one day down the road to a paid, you're gonna lose a lot of volunteer money that comes in, and a lot of effort is spent that we're very grateful for, in raising money, and that's a source that would go away if you look at paid stations. So there are all kind of things that could work in to a conversation if we were sitting down together.
Yeah, and again, that is gonna be selecting what is right for you. You know, to think that the fire departments of the future will be able to continue to support themselves by barbecuing chicken is,
It doesn't buy a new aerial truck.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But it
I mean,
helps.
I don't dispute that. But the bulk of that truly falls in Pennsylvania on municipal, local level government.
That was my favorite line that I said during our last budget cycle. How many barbecue chickens do you think they have to sell to pay for a $2.4 million truck? You know, we could either give them money or, I mean, you know, you know, it's nice. I mean, it pays operating expenses and it helps. And
Yeah.
besides that, I like eating the pit beef. But,
Yeah.
you know, but still, it's only a small portion of their budget. You know, municipalities are just gonna have to step up.
And like Andy said, we're 72 years old. Some of us have seen ladies' auxiliaries that had 60 and 70 people, and they raised hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Now we're down to ladies' auxiliaries that have 6, 7, 8 We can't depend on that
Can't sustain
anymore.
it.
That's gone by the wayside, at least for us. I don't know if you guys are finding that, you know, in Shrewsbury and Glen Rock, but I know we have. Every woman in town used to have a bake sale once a month, and they do pies and cakes and whatever we needed they would do. They would rent out, you guys rented out the hall for suppers with the ladies' auxiliary, and I know it got to the point that you lacked volunteers and couldn't do it anymore. You know, I'm sorry to see those days gone, but some of you guys weren't even around when that was happening, but everybody jumped in to do whatever they had to do.
Well, I'm hearing a lot of good discussion that will make good purpose and a good use for a committee.
Yes. There's another question.
For the borough folks, this is just speaking as a Shrewsbury Borough resident. And I always say this with the school board, they're not afraid to raise taxes and take money. Because, and a lot of times the folks on the board, they don't care about spending money because it's coming out of somebody else's pocket. And you can argue, people can say I'm wrong, but if you look at most of the folks sitting on like the school boards, when they wanna put a new $2 million football field in, you know, because another school district did it, they wanna compete with them, they, oh, that's gonna look great, you know, and boom, they vote for it. They don't take into consideration. From the fire department standpoint, I think it's really important that the boroughs and municipalities involved, the stakeholders, shareholders, you know, in the big picture, also look at how much the different departments run into different municipalities. So it's one thing to say, Shrewsbury runs 500 calls, Glen Rock runs 475, and New Freedom runs 450. But it's important that you all see the breakdown of where those calls are.
All right.
What municipalities are in. So when it comes down to it, that basically, what I'm getting to is that the person receiving the majority of the benefits is going to need to put the majority of the capital.
Right.
So the stakeholders need to step up to the plate. And again, that's, you know, so like from Shrewsbury Borough standpoint, going back when they regionalized the police department and started off with Shrewsbury and New Freedom. Okay? You know, they pretty much figured out the 50-50 split. Then turned out that it was like a 60-40 actual, 60% of it was in Shrewsbury Borough, 40% was in New Freedom Borough. Then they recalibrated numbers the next year. Then you had Glen Rock come on board for a few years. Then they stepped out for a few years. Then you had others step in. So it's real important that instead of just having numbers set in concrete, those numbers are gonna fluctuate based on, you know, who gets the shared service.
Well, that's what we did with EMS. We
Right.
did the percentage of call volume
Yep.
that.
So that's
our
important,
EMS
that variable is important to be remembered.
You
Some
know, and-
people just say, oh, we'll split it by 5, and as we all know, there's one municipality
We
that
went by the percentage.
wouldn't stand a snowball's chance of participating in that.
And as you factor that in, just understand that if, and there's different funding formulas you can use to distribute funds to the fire department. Just understand that some of those, such as if you base it on call volume and call volume for a previous year, you could have certain events that might trigger things there and skew that one way or the other. Example, we get a series of thunderstorms coming through, hits one part of your service area but not the other part. If that's the only parameter that you're using is call volume, you know, that could send that one way or the other.
Calls from 83 can do the same thing, where it's not probably half the time benefiting any municipality, but most of that happens. It goes through Shrewsbury Township, so,
Yep.
we see
One
that.
cold night with a freezing fog on Interstate 83 has a great possibility of skewing your call volume for a month or a year.
But again, that's the committee that can talk about those.
Right, yeah, we can take that into consideration.
Well, even your 60-40 split between Shrewsbury Borough and New Freedom Borough, I mean, the people in New Freedom Borough come into Shrewsbury Borough, that's where the shopping is. They go to the different stores, the antiques, you know, restaurants, whatever, so That's why I think the whole, Commonwealth structure is a little bit shaky.
To address constitutional reform, that would be done starting at your local state representative or your state senator. You know, and with that, as we look at this, if you look at the 5 municipalities collectively, and we think of the 5 municipalities as one fire service area, referencing the 2020 census data, that takes us to about 18,000 people. Maybe you need to look at that as a fire protection service area, and how do we need to look at that and do that collectively?
Yeah, per capita kind of a charge instead of
Per capita, assessed value, you know, there are different funding formulas, and each one has its own degree of accuracy and variation.
And that's where your input, I think, would be very important when we're doing this.
Oh, I can share information for you, but make no doubt it's the elected officials that gotta make the
Oh,
decisions.
absolutely.
Right.
Well, that's, I mean, I think that's why everything normally is tax-based, because then it is on assessed value, it's on millage, it's, you know, it makes it at least fair across the board.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
You all are a lot further ahead than you think. The fact that you are here today and discussing this at this level, trust me, we're across the Commonwealth and we hear a lot of this same type of dialogue. But just having this open conversation and knowing that you know that there's next steps here and you're willing to take those steps to get to the finish line, I mean, it's music to our ears. But we're here. There's no cost to the municipalities for the technical assistance that we provide to you, so take advantage of it. You know, if he doesn't do what he's supposed to do, just let me know. Just kidding. Chief is great, and he won't steer you wrong. So we're here to assist. You know.
So you're gonna put something together, Todd, and get back to us? Is that-
Yeah, I'll follow up with Yvonne, and then once I get that squared away and know what we need to do, then I'll reach out to each municipality, make sure everybody's on board before we move forward.
Once again, thank you. Appreciate all the work that you do. It's a
Todd
lot
did a
of
great
effort.
job.
Get things,
Certainly.
keeps it
Did
going.
a great job, John.
And thank
Were you
guys.
done, John?
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
if you have no other questions, you know, let the report stand as an inspiration for future conversation.
and are you okay with them reaching out to you?
Oh,
If
absolutely.
you have some other questions come about, definitely have his contact information available.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I just,
Oh,
Brad and I are kind of talking here, and we're struggling to kind of see what the whole finish line is with all this. So would it be more beneficial for, before we get any other municipalities in here, in line with meetings and everything else, do the 3 departments and Shrewsbury Township have an association, or whatever you want to call it, to work on aligning policies, bylaws, procedures, improving that working relationship, figuring out what the area needs for services before we're dragging everybody else into it. And then as we need to figure out, you know, a ladder truck or a rescue or whatever, bringing them folks into it.
I think you raised a good question, but I don't think,
A lot of circles here the last hour.
no, I don't think we know what the finish line is. And I think
Yeah.
that's what the committee
what
would
the-
talk about with the fire departments to try to determine what that finish line might look like. But I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate that from a township standpoint. And maybe that could just kind of be of a little subcommittee off the other group or something for Shrewsbury Township to meet with the other 3 fire departments or something, but.
Well, let me ask this. Do you feel, well, without giving you my answer, I mean, do you feel that there's a need that you have for coming up with, I mean, as a semi-outsider looking at your departments, I think you guys do sit down and write up. I mean,
Well, and I'm just, so you're right, we do a pretty good job, but when you sit down and you look at what's on paper, you know, it's, policies differ, can we align them so it's easier? No matter what, you know, if you're 61, 58, 59, like, this is the playbook you're following. You know, I don't know, we talk about regionalization and everything else, I think our biggest issues is manpower and funding. You know, what avenues can we explore? I know we talked before about, you know, do you do a regional duty engine? Do we look at some other places that have stipend programs? Like what? I don't know. I'm just trying to collect everything together here. And
I have a suggestion there. I agree that
I'm struggling to understand what the next step is.
some manpower and funding is a big issue.
those are the two
Operations
things
is,
that I'm interested in,
Right.
is manpower and funding.
Yeah,
If
so-
you could, yeah, I'm sorry.
That's right, let me suggest that maybe each department, before we get together, take a quick look. You can't go too far out in the future, it's much harder to do. But just look at a 3-year plan, I know we did that with some things at the borough. And say, okay, in 3 years, equipment, okay? Apparatus, other equipment. What do you wanna do on manpower? What's your thoughts? Is it a stipend, to start trying to, you know, pay or what? And then you'll have different ideas from all 3 departments. But governing manpower and finance, that's really what it comes down to. And good ideas, and it'll form a consensus. The other thing, just, and this won't happen in my lifetime, I'm 78. But as more and more money comes from township and the boroughs, along with that, eventually will come oversight. It will happen. Politicians aren't gonna be given all that money without, you know, just like you have a police commission, yada, yada, yada. And just be aware of that. And right now, everybody, I think, on all the boroughs, and or maybe not, you mentioned a couple of people at New Freed. I know at Shrewsbury, and I think at the township, everybody's fully behind fire and EMS. It's not an issue to speak of. But don't count on that being there forever as the money goes up and up. Because it's getting tighter and tighter on everything that everybody has in mind. So just,
So I think the education part of it, I mean, we have to get the word out to citizens and council and make sure that everybody's on the same page. I mean, Del Wilhelm sat with me and he said, well, the reason we need a ladder truck is because we gotta reach out over these cars. I didn't think about that. Okay, yeah, you gotta have a longer ladder to get out over cars that are parked along the street, you know? I mean, okay, that makes sense. But we have other people that say, I mean, you heard it in our meetings, well, you know, they could just do more work and volunteer stuff and have more events. So let me understand, you want these guys to run into a building and put out a fire and bring out the kids and stuff, and then you want them to come back and make pit beef and you know, I mean, you only have so many hours in a day. So, you know, is it great that you do that? Absolutely. Is it great? And it's really great too from a community contact point of view. People come and see you and they see what you are and who you, and whatnot. So, but it's not the way to raise money for a $2 million truck.
Right.
So that's why we need to get out to our citizens why you need this.
Well, just like that in one of our meetings, not too long ago, I asked Brad, I said, does this area really need a ladder truck? I said, we don't have any high rises, do we really need it? And he explained how helpful it is and safety just on a 2-story home and the safety advantage.
Or bending a
Something-
roof.
Something that I didn't know
and again, as you look at the process, whatever process you choose to get there, I don't know if there's an end page or a final destination as much as there are mileposts or benchmarks along the way that at this point we are at this level and we agree on this funding formula, or we agree that we need an aerial device here and it costs so much and the prorated share is this amount. Things like that, take small steps as you go ahead, and with that first step, complete that and then think about what the next one is. Because really, this should be an ongoing dynamic process that meets the ever-changing challenges of a growing community.
And the key to what you said is taking the first step, whatever that might be. If it's the departments getting together first, to take a look, or us getting I still think this, meeting that we are talking about putting together is very important because it involves collectively
And maybe different steps and different processes are done at different levels. If you look at comparison of operational issues, if you get the 3 fire companies to sit down at the table themselves and say, look, this is what we got, this is what works, this is what doesn't work, and is this good for all of us, that's probably something you don't need elected officials to get involved with. That is
The processes and the procedures.
that is a
yeah.
line operational issue that the fire guys will know how to do because that's what they do.
Yeah,
You
no,
know.
I can't sit in on that.
Yeah.
I'd be useless for that.
Yeah, and
Let me just throw one other quick thing out before we break up. A year ago, I offered this, and I really think this is important. We all have newsletters. You guys should have an article in like at least every other newsletter, if not every newsletter, because they're quarterly? So, and it should just be something about what you can do to help the fire company, or, there's probably somebody who writes in each fire company. It would be really neat to see that article to keep people's mind on the fact that we have fire companies and this is what they need. You could even, and I know you're already putting on Savvy Citizen, the pit beefs and, that kind of stuff. It would be good to have other things on there too. And having an article in the paper, I think, would keep fire and EMS in the forefront of people's minds.
I just want to add this because I feel like I'm getting ready to walk out of a funeral. As far as personnel, manpower, people power, we are doing good right now. Understand that. So I believe we just finished up our 3rd year of tax credits where we had the school increase the municipalities, and you all would know this better than me for each of your municipalities, but I know for the numbers I've submitted in those 3 years, using the same criteria has not changed. Right. The Freedoms recently did it, but criteria has not changed. Our number of people that have met that criteria has increased by 55%.
Oh, yeah, I love that. When we approved it, it was a whole page of people.
So it took 40 years to get here, ignoring the fire service. 6, 7 years ago, Act 172, 176, whatever it was, gave you guys the ability to start doing something. In 2020, it got beefed up. We're doing it. It's increasing the numbers. Once we get those people in the door, it takes 1.5 to 2 years to get them fully trained up, and that's if they're motivated and sacrifice a lot of family time. But those numbers are going up. So I say it's not because of the tax credits, half will say it is, because that gets them in the door. And once they're in the door, those credits help keep them motivated. And not motivated, gives them a goal to achieve. So,
Yeah.
by me watching those numbers, we're not so much doing this anymore. We're holding even and getting a little better. So please don't leave with that mentality of, oh, we gotta start paying people next year. Like, I
Right.
think it's planning ahead that this stuff doesn't hold. And once those older members start deciding they really wanna retire, then,
Yeah, I think that's what
Right.
we're all talking
You know,
about
and
and hoping never happens,
if-
but
if you look at this collectively, and I will give you my impression from traveling throughout the state and doing countywide projects, Erie, Warren, Crawford County, out through whatever areas, what your 3 volunteer fire companies do collectively right now, today, is leaps and bounds ahead of many in almost every other part of the state.
that's great to
Make,
hear.
make no doubt about that.